High Warden Zixtal stood before the Galactic Security Council, their crystalline form pulsing with pride as they presented the latest statistics from the Void's Grasp Maximum Security Facility. Another perfect cycle. Esteemed council members, 0 escapes, 0 casualties, 0 compromises. Our quantum-locked cells and psychic dampeners continue to hold the most dangerous entities in known space. The council members rippled in approval, their various appendages and sensory organs expressing satisfaction through a rainbow of bioluminescent displays. Void's Grasp had become the gold standard for containment across the Allied systems, housing everything from psychic parasites to silicon-based berserkers. However, Zixtal continued, their crystalline edges catching the light. We face an unprecedented challenge. We've been tasked with containing our first human prisoner. The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Most species knew of humans only through scattered reports and rumors. Creatures from a planet with crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, and extreme temperature variations. A Deathworld species that somehow survived conditions that would kill most sentient life. I assure you, Zixtal's voice rang clear, our facilities are more than adequate. The prisoner, designation H001, was apprehended after an illegal salvage operation in the restricted zone. While their species' reputation is notable, they remain bound by the same laws of physics as any other being. Subwarden Neri, a gaseous entity contained within an environmental suit, drifted forward. With respect, High Warden, perhaps we should review the containment protocols. Our database on human physiological limits is incomplete. Unnecessary. Zixtal dismissed the concern with a crystalline chime. Our cells can contain plasma-based life forms. A mere carbon-based organic poses no special challenge. Later that cycle, as H001 was being processed for internment, Subwarden Neri couldn't shake their unease. The human, who called herself Jin Zhao, seemed too calm for someone facing imprisonment in the galaxy's most secure facility. Jin stood in the processing chamber, her environment suit disabled and confiscated, breathing the facility's standard atmosphere as if it weren't a cocktail of gases lethal to most carbon-based life. She was shorter than expected, with dark hair tied back practically and eyes that seemed to constantly assess her surroundings. Comfortable? Neri asked, genuinely curious about how the human could appear so at ease. Oh, sure, Jin shrugged, watching the robotic systems scan her biology. Reminds me of that mining job I did in the methane lakes of Titan. Bit chilly, though. The scanning system chirped in alarm, reporting back impossible readings. Jin's cellular structure showed signs of natural radiation resistance, bones dense enough to withstand extreme pressures, and a nervous system that seemed to ignore normal pain response thresholds. Fascinating, the facility's medical eye commented. Your species appears to have evolved redundant survival mechanisms that violate several efficiency principles. Jin grinned. That's humans for you. Why have one way to not die when you can have backup systems for your backup systems? She flexed her hands, studying the quantum phase manacles with obvious interest. Nice tech you got here. Reminds me of those experimental engines I salvaged last month. The ones you illegally salvaged from a restricted military site, Zixtal corrected, entering the chamber, leading to your current accommodation with us. Right. Though in my defense, they were already pretty salvage. I just salvaged them more efficiently. Jin's eyes tracked the security drones hovering nearby. Say, those plasma containment fields, you've compensated for quantum tunneling effects, right? Because I noticed your power fluctuations are running on a pretty predictable cycle. The High Warden's crystalline form vibrated with irritation. Our containment systems are flawless. Perhaps you should concern yourself less with our security and more with your rehabilitation. Just trying to be helpful. Jin shrugged again, allowing herself to be led toward her cell. By the way, you might want to check your atmospheric processors. Pretty sure I'm hearing a harmonic resonance that shouldn't be there. As the quantum lock door sealed behind their newest prisoner, Neri turned to Zixtal. High Warden, Her readings, they're unlike anything in our database. Perhaps we should. Enough, Zixtal cut them off. She's attempting to unsettle us, nothing more. The human will learn, as all prisoners do, that Void's grasp earned its reputation. No one escapes. No one ever has, and no one ever will. In her cell, Jin Zhao sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, listening to the facility's rhythms, the hum of force fields, the pulse of quantum locks, the whisper of atmospheric processors. A slight smile played across her lips as she began to count the seconds between security suites. The galaxy's most secure prison was about to learn why humans had survived everything their homeworld had thrown at them. After all, what was a few quantum locks and plasma fields compared to a species that treated drinking liquid hot bean juice as a cultural cornerstone? The first sign that something was amiss at Void's grasp came during the night cycle, though night was a relative concept in deep space. The facility's AI reported an anomaly in Cell Block 7's atmospheric composition, a slight increase in carbon dioxide levels. Impossible, Zixtal declared, their crystalline form refracting the emergency lights. The atmosphere is quantum-locked like everything else. Check the sensors. Sensors functioning normally, the AI responded. However, the human's vital signs indicate increased physical activity. She appears to be exercising. Through the cell's monitoring system, they watched as Jin performed what she casually termed her usual workout routine, a series of movements that, according to their calculations, would have pulverized the bones of most species under the cell block's heightened gravity. Fascinating adaptation, Neri observed, their gaseous form swirling with interest. The increased gravity appears to be strengthening her rather than crushing her. According to her file, one of the junior wardens, a silicon-based entity named Galactic, reported humans evolved on a planet where gravity constantly tried to pull them apart. They respond by getting stronger. Jin's voice came through the comm system, slightly breathless but amused. You know, this reminds me of when I was stuck in that gas giant's gravity well for 3 weeks. Now that was a workout. Though I did have better music then. Any chance of getting some entertainment feeds in here? Zixtal's form vibrated with annoyance. This is a prison, not a resort. Fair enough. Guess I'll have to make my own fun. By the way, has anyone checked on that harmonic resonance I mentioned? Because I'm pretty sure it's gotten worse in the last 6 hours. The facility's AI chimed in. High Warden, she is correct. I'm detecting a 0.03% increase in vibration patterns through the quantum lock structure. A meaningless variation, Zixtal dismissed. Focus on monitoring the prisoner, not indulging her attempts at distraction. But over the next few cycles, small anomalies began to accumulate. The quantum-locked atmosphere in Jin's cell showed trace elements that shouldn't have been possible. The gravity plating reported microscopic fluctuations in its field strength. And most disturbing of all, the human appeared to be sleeping soundly in conditions that should have induced terminal stress in most carbon-based life forms. During one routine inspection, Neri found Jin sitting cross-legged on her cell floor, surrounded by small piles of what appeared to be dismantled portions of her food rations. "What are you doing?" they asked, genuinely curious. "Oh hey." Jin looked up brightly. "I was bored, so I thought I'd do some chemistry. Did you know these nutrient packs contain trace amounts of metallic compounds? Reminds me of this survival situation I had in the Kuiper Belt. Amazing what you can make with basic materials when you really need to. The rations are specifically designed to be inert," Galactic stated, their silicon form processing the information with obvious concern. "Everything's inert until it isn't," Jin replied cheerfully. "Like that quantum resonance issue. Getting pretty noticeable now, isn't it? If you listen carefully, you can feel it in your bones. Well, assuming you have bones. Sorry, didn't mean to be structurist." That night cycle, Neri found themselves reviewing the facility's historical data. No prisoner had ever shown such casual disregard for the supposedly lethal containment protocols. Most species could barely function under the combined stress of the quantum-locked atmosphere, enhanced gravity, and psychic dampeners. Display prisoner activity log. The holographic display showed Jin alternating between intense physical exercises, methodical examination of every surface in her cell, and what appeared to be meditation sessions. But the most concerning detail was subtle, the way she moved in perfect counterpoint to the facility's security suites, as if she'd memorized their rhythm. Her neural patterns are unusual, the AI commented. She appears to be constantly processing multiple streams of environmental data while maintaining biological functions that should be impossible under current conditions. Humans, Galactic mused, joining Neri at the monitoring station. Did you know their planet regularly tries to kill them with extreme weather, tectonic instability, and atmospheric electrical discharges? They call these events Tuesday. An alert chime interrupted their discussion. The harmonic resonance Jin had mentioned was now registering on multiple systems. The quantum lock structures were showing microscopic signs of strain. Nothing dangerous, but the very fact that it was measurable defied engineering principles. High Warden, Neri calmed urgently. I believe we should. I know what you're going to say. Zixtal cut them off. And the answer remains no. The human is attempting psychological warfare, nothing more. Our systems are perfect. In her cell, Jin continued her exercises, moving with deliberate precision. Each movement synchronized perfectly with the facility's subtle vibrations, each breath timed to the quantum field fluctuations. To an outside observer, it might have looked like a simple workout routine. To someone who'd spent their life salvaging technology from the most dangerous corners of space, it was something else entirely, a conversation with the facility itself. You know, she remarked to seemingly no one. The interesting thing about quantum-locked systems is they're only as stable as their underlying resonance patterns. Kind of like that time I had to break out of that automated mining facility on Venus, though their containment fields were a bit less sophisticated. Speaking of which, she paused, head tilted as if listening. That harmonic resonance is about to hit its first critical node in 3, 2, 1. Throughout Void's grasp, every quantum-locked system simultaneously experienced a microscopic hiccup, lasting less than a nanosecond, but representing something that should have been theoretically impossible. Jin smiled. Natural selection had taught humanity many things over the millennia, but perhaps the most important lesson was this. In a universe that constantly tried to kill you, the secret to survival wasn't just being strong or smart. It was understanding that every system, no matter how perfect, had a rhythm. And rhythms could be changed. The first quantum lock failed 3 cycles after Jin's cryptic countdown. Not dramatically, just a momentary fluctuation in a supposedly impenetrable barrier. But in a facility built on absolute certainties, even a momentary uncertainty was unthinkable. Explain, Zixtal demanded, their crystalline form crackling with stress fractures. The facility's AI seemed almost embarrassed. The quantum-locked state briefly became uncertain, as if the system couldn't quite decide which reality it should enforce. That's not possible, Galactic insisted, their silicon matrices realigning anxiously. Quantum locks operate on fundamental physical principles. Jin's voice came through the comm system. But physics is polite. It presents itself as absolute laws until someone comes along and asks, what if? Nicely enough. Like that time I had to escape a black hole's event horizon. Turned out the universal constants were more like universal suggestions. Neri's gaseous form swirled thoughtfully. You cannot have escaped a black hole. That violates several fundamental laws of physics. Jin finished cheerfully. Yeah, I get that a lot. But here's the thing about humans. We evolved on a planet that regularly violates common sense. Did you know we deliberately consume chemicals that cause mild cellular damage because we enjoy the taste? We call it spicy food. The facility's sensors continued reporting impossible readings. The quantum locks were holding, but their underlying field strength showed microscopic fluctuations that perfectly matched Jin's movement patterns. It was as if she had become an integral part of the containment system's quantum state. That's impossible, Zixtal stammered. Impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet by someone stubborn enough, Jin noted. Now about that harmonic resonance. By the 7th cycle, Void's grasp's perfect record was unraveling along with its understanding of reality. The quantum locks remained intact, but their reliability had become probabilistic. The facility's AI had begun speaking in philosophical riddles, questioning the nature of certainty itself. The human, it announced during one crisis meeting, exists in a superposition of contained and uncontained states. The more precisely we try to measure her location, the more uncertain our containment becomes. She's weaponized Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. Arctic asked incredulously. Not weaponized. Jin's voice echoed through systems that should have been isolated, just having a conversation with it. Physics gets lonely sometimes, you know. It likes to be noticed. Neri found themselves oddly fascinated. You speak of fundamental forces as if they're alive. Everything's alive in its own way, Jin replied. Gravity, quantum fields, even space itself, they all have personalities if you pay attention. Some are strict, some are flexible, but all of them appreciate a bit of respect and creative thinking. Warning klaxons blared as another cascade of quantum uncertainty rippled through the facility. The AI's voice had taken on an almost mystical quality. The human does not break physics. She persuades it. Her consciousness exists in harmony with fundamental forces we thought were immutable. Reality itself seems to enjoy her company. Zixtal's crystalline form was now webbed with stress fractures. Shut down all non-essential systems. Redirect power to the quantum locks. About that, Jin commented casually. You might want to reconsider. A harmonic resonance has reached its critical frequency. Trying to force stability now would be like trying to hold back an avalanche with good intentions. The facility shuddered as reality itself seemed to hesitate, caught between what should be and what a human had politely suggested might be interesting to try instead. The end came not with violence or destruction, but with a gentle ripple through space-time that briefly made physics reconsider its career choices. One moment, Jin was in her cell. The next, she was sitting cross-legged in the main control room, smile suggesting this was all perfectly normal. How? Zixtal's voice cracked along with their crystalline surface. Like I said, physics is polite. Sometimes you just need to ask nicely. Jin stretched, entirely comfortable in an atmosphere that should have been lethal. Also, your quantum locks were lovely, but they had a tendency to synchronize their resonance patterns every 3.47 cycles. Create a nice little probability tunnel if you know how to dance with it. The facility's AI spoke with something approaching reverence. You didn't break out. You convinced reality to politely relocate you. Pretty much. Though you really should look into that harmonic resonance issue. Give it another few cycles, and it'll start affecting your structural integrity field. Not catastrophically, she added quickly, seeing Arctic's silicon form beginning to crystallize with stress. Just enough to be embarrassing at your next security audit. Neri's gaseous form swirled with what might have been laughter. You could have left at any time, couldn't you? Why stay 7 cycles? Partly to make a point about underestimating humans, Jin admitted, but mostly because I wanted to give you time to detect and fix that resonance problem. Would have felt bad just leaving without mentioning it. Speaking of which, she pulled out a data chip that definitely hadn't been in her cell. Complete diagnostic and suggested repair protocols. Call it a professional courtesy from one tech specialist to another. The Galactic Security Council's emergency session lasted 3 full cycles. In the end, they'd reached several unprecedented conclusions. Void's grasp would be redesigned with significant input from human engineers, acknowledging that their perspective on impossible was uniquely valuable. The classification of humanity was updated from Deathworld species to reality compliance consultants. Jin Zhao was hired as a security consultant at an embarrassingly high salary. The facility's AI requested, and was granted, permission to study human philosophy, particularly interested in humanity's unique ability to treat universal constants as polite suggestions. Years later, Void's grasp became known as the most secure facility in known space, not because it was impossible to escape, but because it had learned to ask reality nicely to keep people where they were supposed to be. And if sometimes, late in the night cycle, the quantum locks seemed to hum in harmony with an old Earth tune, well, physics had learned to appreciate good music. As for Jin, she returned to her salvage work, though now with proper permits and authorization. She was often heard to remark that the universe's fundamental forces were much better company than most people realized. They just needed someone to talk to them in the right way. After all, in a universe that ran on probability and uncertainty, sometimes the most powerful force wasn't technological superiority or physical might, but simply being a species stubborn enough to look at the impossible and say, well, that's an interesting suggestion, but have you considered this instead? The facility's AI kept a favorite quote from Jin displayed in its core processors. The laws of physics are more like physics guidelines. Really, reality appreciates good manners and creative problem solving. It was a very human perspective, and perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed.